Death hovered somewhere in the vaulted ceiling of the Pierre Hotel's gilded ballroom, patiently waiting for the perfect shot. Maya pulled him closer, her rich, dark skin a striking contrast against his crisp white Tom Ford tuxedo. He stiffened instantly. As the notorious boss of Manhattan's most ruthless Korean syndicate, Christian Park, was unused to being commanded, let alone handled by a beautiful stranger, she let her hand slide up his tense neck, her lips brushing his ear so intimately that the surrounding masquerade completely faded away. "Dance as my husband," she whispered, her grip like iron. "There's a red dot on your forehead." The Pierre Hotel in Manhattan was dripping with the kind of wealth that insulated people from the real world. Beneath the cascade of Swarovski crystal chandeliers, billionaires, politicians, and the city's criminal elite rubbed shoulders, clinking glasses of vintage Dom Perignon. Maya Sinclair stood by a towering marble pillar, a flute of champagne untouched in her hand. Her emerald green silk gown clung perfectly to her curves, the rich fabric complementing the deep, flawless brown of her skin. To anyone watching, she was just another beautiful socialite gracing the charity gala. To the initiated, however, she was a ghost. Maya was an independent contractor, formerly aligned with a private intelligence sector out of Langley, now operating in the grey spaces where corporate espionage met organised crime. She was here for a ledger, a digital drive containing offshore accounts linked to shell companies from Geneva to the Cayman Islands. And the man holding it was currently making his entrance. Christian Park. He didn't look like a monster. He looked like a god walking among mortals. Though he was the undisputed head of a violent Korean syndicate that controlled the East Coast shipping lanes, he bore a perfectly westernized name, a remnant of his early life spent in the foster systems of Chicago before his bloodline reclaimed him. He wore a white Tom Ford tuxedo that set him apart from the sea of black-clad men, moving with a predatory grace that commanded the room's absolute attention. His eyes, dark and unreadable, scanned the crowd, calculating, assessing. Flanking him were his two most trusted lieutenants, Riley and Dominic, both heavily armed, despite the hotel's stringent security checks. Maya's earpiece buzzed lightly. "Target is in the room." Maya crackled the voice of Avery, her handler stationed in a surveillance van, parked 3 blocks down on Fifth Avenue. "He's got the drive in his breast pocket. But we have a problem. Chatter on the dark web just spiked. There's a hit out on him tonight. Unsanctioned." Maya's eyes narrowed. "Who's the buyer?" she murmured, bringing the champagne glass to her lips to mask her moving mouth. "Unknown. But the price is 50 million. Half the assassins in the tri-state area would kill their own mothers for that kind of payout. Get the drive and get out. If he dies before you secure it, the encryption locks permanently." Maya exhaled slowly. The air in the ballroom suddenly felt thick, oppressive. She began to move through the crowd, her heels silent on the plush carpets. She tracked Christian's movements. He was shaking hands with a state senator, his smile charming but utterly devoid of warmth. Maya knew the dossier on him inside out. Christian was ruthless, highly intelligent, and deeply paranoid. Approaching him was practically suicide. But as she closed the distance, her trained eyes caught a flicker of something unnatural. A reflection, not from the chandeliers, but from the high-shadowed balcony overlooking the dance floor. It was a faint crimson glint. A laser sight. Someone had bypassed the hotel's security. A sniper was perched in the upper mezzanine, and the angle was directly aimed at Christian's current position. Maya's heart hammered against her ribs. If Christian died now, the ledger died with him, and her firm would lose the only leverage they had, against a global financial collapse orchestrated by his rivals. She had seconds, maybe less. Christian excused himself from the senator and stepped toward the edge of the dance floor, signaling a waiter for a drink. The crowd parted around him naturally. He was isolated, a perfect target. Maya didn't think. She moved. She intercepted him just as the waiter walked away, stepping smoothly into his personal space. Christian's lieutenants, Riley and Dominic, immediately tensed their hands, dropping to the concealed weapons under their jackets. But Christian raised a single finger, stopping them. He looked down at Maya, his expression a mix of mild amusement and cold curiosity. "I don't believe we've been introduced." Christian said, his voice a deep, resonant baritone that sent an involuntary shiver down her spine. Maya looked him dead in the eyes, noting the faint scent of cedar and expensive scotch on his breath. Over his shoulder, in the reflection of an ornate mirror, she saw it. The tiny, unmistakable red dot dancing across the lapel of his white tuxedo, moving slowly, deliberately upward toward his face. She stepped directly into him, closing the final inch between them, her hands coming up to rest on his shoulders. "Dance as my husband," she whispered, her voice, urgent, trembling just enough to convey the gravity of the moment, yet fierce enough to demand obedience. "There's a red dot on your forehead." For a fraction of a second, Christian's eyes flared. His instincts, honed by decades of surviving assassination attempts, screamed at him to dive for cover, to draw his weapon, to unleash his men. But the string orchestra had just begun to play a slow, sweeping waltz, and any sudden, erratic movement would confirm his awareness, prompting the sniper to pull the trigger immediately. Instead, Christian proved why he was the boss. His expression smoothed into a mask of polite affection. His large, warm hand slid around her waist, gripping the bare skin of her lower back with a bruising intensity, while his other hand clasped hers. "You better not be lying to me, darling," he murmured back, a dangerous smile playing on his lips as he swept her onto the polished wood of the dance floor. Maya matched his steps instantly. They moved in sync, a sudden striking pair that drew the eyes of the room. Upper mezzanine. East side. "Do not look up," she instructed, her voice barely a breath against his cheek as he spun her. By spinning, they became a moving target. The red dot slipped from his forehead, tracing a chaotic line across the crowd as the sniper tried to reacquire a clean shot. Maya could feel the tension vibrating through Christian's solid frame. Underneath the tailored tuxedo, he was built like a weapon, every muscle coiled tight. "Who are you?" Christian asked, his smile never faltering, as he dipped her slightly a move designed to drastically alter his head height. "Someone who needs you alive," Maya replied smoothly, pulling herself back up and bringing her face agonizingly close to his. The proximity was intoxicating, a chaotic mix of adrenaline and sheer physical magnetism. "I need the drive in your breast pocket. If you die, I don't get it. So for the next 3 minutes, we are madly in love, and we cannot keep our hands off each other." Christian let out a low, dark chuckle that vibrated against her chest. A thief with a savior complex. How novel. He spun her again this time, weaving them through a cluster of other dancing couples, using the bodies of Manhattan's elite as unwitting human shields. "If you know who I am, you know I don't hand over my property to beautiful strangers. If I don't get you out of here, your property won't matter," Maya shot back. Her eyes darted toward the balcony. The red dot briefly illuminated the shoulder of her green dress. "They're tracking us. The moment the music stops, the crowd will thin, and you're dead. Riley and Dominic can't shoot into the mezzanine without causing a mass panic, and by the time they draw, your brains will be on the marble floor." Christian's grip on her waist tightened. He knew she was right. "What's the play, sweetheart?" 10 seconds to the chorus, Maya said, counting the beats of the waltz in her head. I'm going to trip. You're going to catch me. When you do, we knock over the champagne tower to our left. The crash will cause a distraction. We use the panic to get out through the kitchen service doors. You're insane, Christian muttered, though there was a glint of genuine admiration in his dark eyes. Just follow my lead. They swept across the floor, their bodies moving with a fluid, desperate grace. Maya felt the heat of his gaze on her, a distraction she couldn't afford. The chorus approached. The music swelled to a dramatic crescendo. Now Maya whispered. She intentionally twisted her ankle, her heel snapping sideways. As she went down, Christian was already there, his arm catching her with practiced ease. But instead of simply righting her, he used their combined momentum to violently shove them both backward. They slammed into the massive 8-tier champagne tower. The sound was deafening. Hundreds of crystal glasses shattered against the floor, raining champagne in a spectacular glittering explosion. The crowd screamed. Women shrieked, pulling back as glass rained down. In the chaos, the sharp, suppressed thwip of a high-caliber bullet shattered the marble floor, exactly where Christian's head had been a second prior. Move, Christian roared, dropping the facade entirely. Pandemonium erupted in the ballroom of the Pierre. The second shot hit a chandelier, sending a shower of crystal and sparks raining over the terrified guests. Riley and Dominic already had their weapons drawn, firing suppressive shots toward the dark mezzanine. Christian didn't let go of Maya. He dragged her through the scattering crowd, his hand enveloping hers. They burst through the heavy brass service doors into the hotel's massive industrial kitchen. Cooks and waitstaff were screaming, diving under stainless steel prep tables as the sound of gunfire echoed from the ballroom. "Keep moving!" Maya yelled over the din, leading him past the flaming stoves and massive walk-in freezers. She knew the blueprints of the hotel by heart. Service elevator. At the end of the hall, my men. Christian started glancing back. Are trained to handle themselves. Maya cut him off, slamming her hand against the elevator button. If you stay, you're a sitting duck. The elevator doors pinged open. They threw themselves inside Christian, frantically hitting the button for the subterranean parking garage. As the doors slid shut, the heavy silence of the descending car enveloped them, broken only by their ragged breathing. Maya leaned against the metal wall, kicking off her broken high heels. She reached up and unpinned her hair, letting the dark curls fall freely around her shoulders, ignoring the way Christian was watching her. The boss was completely unruffled, his breathing already returning to normal. He reached inside his jacket, and for a terrifying second Maya thought he was pulling a gun. Instead, he pulled out his phone, typing out a rapid message before the signal dropped. "You're good," Christian said quietly, his dark eyes locking onto hers. "Military intelligence. The way you clocked that laser, you've done this before." "I'm just a girl trying to make a living," Maya replied, catching her breath. "And right now, my living depends on you honoring our little arrangement." "I never agreed to an arrangement." Christian took a slow step toward her, closing the distance in the small elevator. The sheer physical presence of him was overwhelming. "You saved my life. I acknowledge that. But the ledger stays with me." "Don't be stupid," Christian Maya snapped, using his given name for the first time. He flinched slightly at the familiarity. That hit was an inside job. Nobody gets a sniper rifle into the Pierre without security clearance, and your syndicate bought off the hotel's security chief 3 years ago. The only people who could have cleared that shooter are in your inner circle. The elevator came to a harsh stop, the doors opening to the dimly lit concrete expanse of the underground parking garage. Christian's face hardened, a terrifying mask of cold rage settling over his features. "What do you know I know?" that the $50 million bounty was posted by someone using the IP address from a holding company owned by your underboss, Maya said, stepping out of the elevator. Victor! Christian stopped dead in his tracks. Victor is my brother. Victor is a businessman, Maya corrected, leading him toward the far end of the garage where she had parked her extraction vehicle. And right now, you're bad for business. He wants the offshore accounts on that drive. He kills you. He takes the drive. He takes the throne. Before Christian could process the betrayal, the screech of tires echoed through the garage. 2 black SUVs tore around the corner, their high beams blinding them in the dim light. The vehicles skidded to a halt, blocking the exit, and heavily armed men began pouring out. Looks like Victor sent a clean-up crew, Maya muttered, reaching into the thigh slit of her gown and unholstering a sleek suppressed Glock 19 strapped to her leg. Christian reached to the small of his back, producing a customized 1911. He looked at Maya, a dangerous, thrilling smirk crossing his face despite the impossible odds. For a girl who just wanted to drive, you certainly know how to show a guy a good time. Shut up and shoot, Maya retorted, raising her weapon. The garage erupted into a deafening exchange of gunfire. Maya and Christian dove behind a concrete pillar, bullets chipping away at the thick cement, showering them in dust. Maya moved with lethal precision, taking out 2 men with clean tactical shots. Christian was a force of nature, his fire heavy, calculated, and utterly ruthless. They moved in tandem, an unspoken synergy between them that was as terrifying as it was effective. My car is 30 yards to the left, Maya shouted over the roar of a shotgun blast. Black Maybach. The armor is reinforced. Cover me, Christian yelled. He broke from the pillar, sprinting across the open concrete, while Maya laid down a barrage of suppressive fire, forcing the attackers to duck behind their SUVs. Christian reached the Maybach, tearing the passenger door open just as Maya made a break for it. She slid across the hood of the car, bullets sparking against the reinforced metal, and threw herself into the driver's seat. She gunned the engine. The massive V12 roared to life. Maya threw it into gear, slamming the gas pedal to the floor. The heavy armored Maybach launched forward, smashing directly through the gap between the 2 enemy SUVs, tearing off a bumper and sending sparks flying as they burst out of the garage and into the chaotic, rain-slicked streets of Manhattan. As they sped away into the night, the adrenaline slowly beginning to ebb, Christian turned in his seat to look at Maya. She was bruised, her dress was torn, and she was gripping the steering wheel tight enough to turn her knuckles white. But in the glow of the dashboard lights, her dark skin glowing with a thin sheen of sweat, she looked absolutely magnificent. "All right, Maya," Christian said softly, the silence of the armored cabin heavy with unspoken promises. "You have my attention. Now let's talk about my brother." The tires of the armored Maybach hissed against the rain-slicked asphalt of the Manhattan Bridge. Below them, the East River churned a black void, mirroring the sudden collapse of Christian Park's empire. Inside the cabin, the silence was absolute, heavy with the smell of cordite and the lingering adrenaline of their narrow escape. Maya kept her eyes glued to the rearview mirror. No headlights were tailing them. She navigated the labyrinth of Brooklyn's industrial waterfront, finally pulling into a subterranean parking garage beneath a converted warehouse in Dumbo. The heavy steel door rolled shut behind them, sealing them in a fortress of concrete and shadow. Christian stepped out of the passenger side, his white Tom Ford tuxedo now stained with soot rain and a streak of blood that wasn't his. He didn't look like a man who had just been betrayed by his own flesh and blood. He looked like a predator, calculating its next kill. He unbuttoned his collar, the faint glint of a platinum Audemars Piguet catching the dim garage light as he checked the time. "Safe house?" Christian asked, his voice a low rumble that echoed off the concrete. "One of them!" Maya replied, leading him toward a freight elevator. She pressed her thumb against a biometric scanner hidden beneath a rusted electrical box. The scanner chirped, and the heavy metal doors parted. Untraceable. Bought under a dummy corporation linked to a dead shell company in Belize. Even if Victor has the NYPD and the feds in his pocket, he won't find us here. The elevator jolted upward, opening directly into a massive 3,000 square foot loft. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic million-dollar view of the Manhattan skyline. The interior was minimalist cold and strictly functional servers, humming in a glass-enclosed room, a wall of encrypted monitors, and a sleek, dark leather sofa dominating the center of the room. Maya walked straight to a steel island in the open kitchen, dropping her Glock 19 onto the counter with a heavy thud. The adrenaline was finally wearing off, leaving a dull ache in her twisted ankle. She reached around to the zipper of her torn emerald silk gown. "Turn around," she commanded. Christian didn't move. He leaned against the reinforced doorframe, his dark, calculating eyes raking over her. The deep brown of her skin glowed in the ambient light of the city skyline, the ruined silk clinging to her curves like a second skin. I've seen women in far less Maya, and usually under much less stressful circumstances. I don't care what you've seen, Christian. Turn around! She snapped, her patience fraying. A faint smirk touched his lips, but he obliged, turning his back to her. The rustle of silk pooling on the floor was the only sound in the room. Maya quickly stepped into a pair of tactical cargo pants and a fitted black combat shirt she kept stashed in a go bag beneath the counter. "You're bleeding," Maya noted, pulling a heavy medical kit from a cabinet. Christian looked down at his left arm. A shard of crystal from the shattered chandelier at the Pierre was embedded deeply in his bicep, the white fabric soaked through with crimson. He hadn't even noticed. "Sit," Maya ordered, gesturing to one of the leather bar stools. He moved with a predatory grace, taking a seat while Maya poured 2 fingers of Macallan 25 from a crystal decanter on the counter. She handed it to him. He downed it in one smooth swallow, his eyes never leaving her face as she stepped directly between his knees to access his arm. The proximity was electric. The heat radiating off his body was a stark contrast to the cold steel of the loft. Maya sterilized a pair of forceps. "This is going to sting." "I've had worse," he murmured. She gripped the shard and pulled it out in one clean, brutal motion. Christian didn't even flinch. His jaw locked, but his gaze remained fixed on her lips, then drifted up to her dark, intense eyes. Maya pressed a gauze pad hard against the wound, her fingers brushing the hard muscle of his arm. "Victor," Maya said softly, breaking the tension before it consumed them both. She taped the bandage down tightly. Why would he make a move now? The Korean syndicates are notoriously traditional. Fratricide is a death sentence from the elders. "Victor is impatient," Christian replied, his voice darkening. He reached up his large hand, gently wrapping around her wrist, stopping her from pulling away. His thumb brushed the erratic pulse jumping under her dark skin. "My brother has been quietly buying up the shipping ports in Newark. I told him to back off. The Italian families control the union there and a war would cost us billions." Victor didn't want to listen. He thinks the old ways are dead. He thinks with the ledger in his pocket he can buy his way out of the elders' wrath. "The ledger," Maya reminded him, pulling her wrist gently from his grasp, though the loss of his touch sent a cold shiver down her spine. "I saved your life. I want the drive." Christian reached into his breast pocket and pulled out a sleek black titanium thumb drive. He held it up between them. $50 billion in untraceable offshore assets. The lifeblood of my entire organization. My employers need the routing numbers to freeze the accounts before Victor uses them to fund a private army. Maya countered. I don't want your money. I want to bankrupt your brother's coup. Christian slowly lowered the drive, slipping it back into his pocket. If Victor thinks I'm dead, he'll initiate a hostile takeover of my inner circle by sunrise. He has to rally my capos. If we freeze the accounts now, they'll know someone else has the drive. We need Victor to assemble them first. We need him confident. And then, Maya asked, crossing her arms. And then, Christian said, a lethal, terrifying smile spreading across his face. We kill him in front of them. Dawn broke over the East River, painting the sky in bruised shades of purple and grey. Maya had spent the last 4 hours at the server racks, hacking into the city's private surveillance grids, while Christian slept on the leather sofa, his customized 1911 resting on his chest. Got him! Maya said, her voice cutting through the quiet hum of the loft. Christian was awake, instantly moving to stand behind her. The scent of cedar and expensive soap wafted from him. He had used her shower at some point, and he was now dressed in a spare set of black tactical gear she kept for her handlers. It fit him perfectly, making him look less like a CEO and more like the ruthless killer he was raised to be. Maya pointed to a satellite feed on the central monitor. Teterboro Airport. Private Hangar 4. Victor isn't rallying your capos in the city. He's bringing them to a neutral, highly secured location to distribute the new cash flow. He's chartered a Gulfstream G650. If things go south, he plans to be over international waters by noon. Who is with him? Christian asked, his breath warm against the shell of her ear, as he leaned over her shoulder to inspect the screen. Maya tapped a few keys, enhancing the thermal imaging. He's got a heavy security detail, ex-military contractors. The perimeter is locked down tighter than Fort Knox. But look closely at the entrance of the hangar. She zoomed in on a figure standing by the tail of the jet, smoking a cigarette. The resolution sharpened, revealing a familiar face. Christian's jaw tightened so hard, Maya heard his teeth grind. Riley, his most trusted lieutenant, the man who had been by his side at the Pierre. Riley let the sniper in. Maya said quietly, the pieces clicking into place. He used the chaos of the champagne tower to slip away. He didn't fire at the balcony. He fired at the ceiling to cover the sniper's retreat. It wasn't just Victor. Your entire inner circle is infected. Christian stepped back, his eyes dark and empty. The betrayal of a brother was one thing. The betrayal of a loyal soldier was another entirely. He walked over to the kitchen island and began efficiently loading magazines for his weapons. The metallic clack-clack of the bullets, the only sound in the room. Are you backing out? Christian asked without looking at her. This isn't a retrieval mission anymore, Maya. This is an execution. You're a spy, not an assassin. Maya stood up, unplugging a heavily encrypted tablet from the server rack and sliding it into her tactical vest. She grabbed her Glock, checking the chamber before sliding it into her thigh holster. She walked up to Christian, invading his space just as she had on the dance floor. I'm whatever I need to be to get the job done, she said, looking up into his lethal eyes. Besides, you're going to need someone to watch your back. Riley knows your tactics. He doesn't know mine. Christian stared at her, the cold fury in his eyes briefly giving way to a burning, undeniable hunger. Before Maya could react, his hand shot out, wrapping around the back of her neck. He pulled her flush against his chest, his mouth crashing down onto hers. The kiss was brutal, desperate, and tasted of danger and expensive scotch. Maya gasped against his lips, but her body betrayed her logic, her hands immediately fisting in the fabric of his tactical shirt. She kissed him back with equal ferocity, a momentary surrender to the adrenaline and the magnetic pull that had been building since she first touched him in the ballroom. When he finally pulled away, they were both breathing heavily. Christian's thumb traced her bottom lip, his eyes blazing. If we survive this, Maya, you and I are going to have a very long conversation about your future. Let's focus on living past breakfast first, she whispered, her heart hammering against her ribs. 40 minutes later, the armoured Maybach idled in a patch of dense trees just outside the perimeter fence of Teterboro Airport. The rain had started again, a heavy, blinding downpour that worked perfectly to their advantage. Maya sat in the passenger seat, tapping rapidly on her tablet. I'm routing a localized EMP surge through the airport's subgrid. It's going to knock out the cameras and the electronic locks on Hangar 4 for exactly 90 seconds. After that, backup generators kick in. 90 seconds is an eternity, Christian said, affixing a suppressor to the barrel of his rifle. Initiating in 3, 2, 1, go. The floodlights surrounding the hangar died instantly, plunging the tarmac into pitch blackness. Christian and Maya moved like shadows, slipping through a compromised section of the chain-link fence. They approached the side service door of the massive metal structure. 2 guards equipped with night vision goggles were already moving to investigate the power failure. Christian didn't hesitate. 2 suppressed shots rang out, pfft, and the guards crumpled to the wet asphalt before they could even draw their weapons. Maya swiped a keycard cloned from the security grid, and the heavy side door clicked open. They stepped inside the cavernous hangar. The backup generators hummed to life, bathing the interior in a sickly yellow emergency light. In the center of the hangar stood the sleek white Gulf Stream. Surrounding it were 5 black SUVs and a dozen heavily armed men. And standing at the base of the boarding stairs holding a silver briefcase was Victor Park. Next to him, holding an assault rifle, was Riley. Victor! Christian's voice roared through the hangar, amplified by the cavernous space. Every gun in the room snapped toward the catwalk where Christian stood fully exposed, looking down like a vengeful god. Kill him! Victor shrieked, his composure shattering instantly. But as Riley raised his rifle to fire at his former boss, the cold steel barrel of Maya's Glock pressed directly against the base of his skull from behind. She had used Christian's grand entrance as a distraction, slipping beneath the vehicles to flank the command team. Drop it, Riley, Maya whispered, her voice lethal. Or your brains are going to paint the fuselage. The hangar descended into a standoff of epic proportions, the air thick with tension. Christian slowly walked down the metal stairs of the catwalk, his rifle aimed squarely at his brother's chest. You always were too loud, Victor, Christian said softly. But Victor suddenly smiled a nasty, victorious sneer. He didn't look at his brother. He looked directly at Maya. I wouldn't pull that trigger, Ms. Sinclair. Victor mocked, his voice dripping with venom. Not unless you want Avery and your friends at Langley to burn. Did you really think I orchestrated this hit on my own? Check the false bottom of the briefcase. Maya's blood ran cold. She kicked the back of Riley's knee, sending him to the ground, and kept her gun trained on him, while using her free hand to flip the latches of the silver briefcase at Victor's feet. Inside wasn't cash. It was a dossier, and stamped in red ink across the top page was the unmistakable seal of her own private intelligence agency. Maya looked up, locking eyes with Christian across the hangar. The hit hadn't just been a family coup. It was sanctioned by the very people Maya worked for. And she was standing in the middle of a trap. The sickly yellow glow of the backup generators cast long, distorted shadows across the Teterboro hangar. The silence that followed Victor's revelation was absolute, broken only by the low, idling hum of the Gulfstream G650's massive Rolls-Royce engines. Maya stared at the dossier resting in the silver briefcase at Victor's feet. Even from the catwalk above the distinct black and gold crest of her employer, an elite, highly classified division deeply entangled with Black Cube and former Langley operatives was unmistakable. You see, Brother Victor called out, his voice echoing with smug satisfaction. You've spent your entire life hoarding the syndicate's wealth, playing by the elders' archaic rules. But the world doesn't run on loyalty anymore. It runs on data and leverage. The intelligence community wanted your ledger to map our offshore network. I gave them a better deal. I get the throne, they get the routing numbers, and you get a bullet at the Pierre. Maya's earpiece suddenly crackled to life, a sharp burst of static breaking the dead air. Maya, stand down. It was Avery, her handler, the man who had recruited her out of JSOC 5 years ago. He wasn't in a surveillance van in Manhattan. He was patched directly into Victor's communication grid. Avery Maya whispered, her voice dangerously calm. Her Glock remained pressed against the base of Riley's skull. Tell me this is a counterplay. It's business. Maya Avery's voice was completely devoid of emotion, filtered through state-of-the-art encryption. Christian Park is an unmanageable asset. Victor is willing to play ball with Palantir's tracking software. He's letting us backdoor the East Coast shipping lanes. You were sent in to secure the drive only if the sniper missed. But since you decided to play bodyguard to a dead man walking, your status has been updated. You're burned, Maya. Your accounts are frozen. Your identity is scrubbed. You don't exist. A cold, hollow void opened in Maya's chest, instantly flooded by a rush of pure, white-hot fury. She had given her life to the agency. She had bled for them in Caracas, Moscow, and Geneva, and they had sold her out to a fratricidal mobster for a port contract in Newark. She looked up at Christian. He was still standing on the catwalk, his customized rifle trained on his brother. He was watching her, waiting for her move. He didn't look angry. He looked like he understood. They were two wolves backed into the same corner, betrayed by the packs they led. Do it, Maya Victor taunted, gesturing to the heavily armed private military contractors, academy dropouts with no morals, and itchy trigger fingers encircling the jet. Put a bullet in Riley. Drop your weapon. If you walk away now, my friends at Langley might let you live out your days as a ghost. Maya took a slow, deep breath, the scent of jet fuel and damp concrete filling her lungs. Her beautiful dark features hardened into a mask of absolute lethality. I was born a ghost, Victor, Maya said, her voice carrying through the cavernous space. She didn't drop her weapon. Instead, she pulled the trigger. The suppressed shot thwip shattered Riley's kneecap. He screamed, collapsing onto the concrete. In the exact same fraction of a second, Maya threw herself backward, sliding beneath the chassis of a blacked-out Cadillac Escalade, just as the hangar erupted into a deafening storm of gunfire. Christian didn't miss a beat. He opened fire from the catwalk, unleashing a devastating barrage of high-caliber rounds that tore through Victor's security detail. 2 of the Academy contractors dropped instantly. Victor shrieked, diving behind the reinforced landing gear of the Gulfstream, as bullets sparked off the silver briefcase, scattering classified documents into the air. "Get the plane moving!" Victor screamed to the pilots. "Take off!" Now Maya rolled out from under the SUV, dual-wielding her Glock, and a Heckler & Koch MP5 she snatched from a fallen guard. She laid down brutal, calculated suppressive fire, her military training taking over. She didn't waste a single bullet. Every shot was a kill, or a crippling blow. Christian leaped from the catwalk, a terrifying 15-foot drop, rolling perfectly as he hit the tarmac and coming up, firing. He moved like a shadow through the strobe-like flashes of muzzle fire, cutting a path directly toward Maya. The Gulfstream's engines whined, pitching into a deafening roar as the massive jet began to taxi forward, its nose turning toward the open hangar doors. "He's making a run for it," Maya shouted over the roar of the turbines, taking out a contractor who was trying to flank Christian from behind a stack of hydraulic lifts. Christian reached her, grabbing her by the tactical vest and pulling her tight against his side as a hailstorm of bullets shredded the Cadillac they were using for cover. "Let him go." We don't have the firepower to stop a G65. Oh, and local law enforcement is going to swarm this place in less than 3 minutes. He was right. The distant wail of police sirens was already bleeding through the rain. The Maybach Christian yelled. They broke cover, sprinting back toward the side service door. Maya fired blindly behind them, watching as the massive white Gulf Stream tore out of the hangar and into the blinding rain, Victor safely inside. Riley lay bleeding on the floor, screaming for a medic, as the remaining contractors scrambled to secure the perimeter. They burst out into the storm, the torrential rain instantly soaking them to the bone. Maya threw herself into the driver's seat of the Maybach Christian, diving into the passenger side just as she slammed it into reverse. The V12 engine roared. She spun the heavy armoured car in a perfect J-turn, smashing through the damaged chain-link fence and launching them onto Route 4, disappearing into the chaotic early morning traffic of New Jersey, just as the first wave of police cruisers swarmed the airport. They drove in absolute silence for an hour. Maya navigated the winding, fog-choked roads of the Hudson Valley, pushing the Maybach far past the speed limit. Her hands gripped the leather steering wheel so tightly her knuckles ached. Her mind was a tactical chessboard, rapidly calculating her assets. 0. She had 0 assets. Her passports, her offshore accounts in Zurich, her encrypted comms all burned. She glanced at Christian. He was leaning his head back against the plush leather seat, his eyes closed. The adrenaline had faded, leaving behind the exhaustion of near death. His white shirt was ruined, his hands bruised and bloody, but the sheer magnetic power of his presence hadn't diminished. "Where to?" Maya asked, her voice raspy. "My safe houses are compromised. If Black Cube is running point on this, they've already flagged every license plate, facial recognition camera and toll booth on the eastern seaboard." Christian didn't open his eyes. "Route 28. Take it past Kingston. There's a dirt road marked by a rusted mailbox near the Ashokan Reservoir. Turn there. Who owns it?" "No one," Christian replied smoothly, finally turning his head to look at her. The intensity in his dark eyes made her breath catch. "It's a property I bought through a ghost corporation 12 years ago, before I took over the syndicate. Not even Victor knows it exists. It's off the grid. No Wi-Fi, no cell towers, no digital footprint." 2 hours later, they arrived. The property was a stunning, brutalist fortress of glass, steel, and reclaimed wood built directly into the side of a mountain. It was completely hidden by ancient pines overlooking the vast, misty expanse of the reservoir. Maya parked the battered Maybach in a subterranean garage. They walked up the concrete stairs into the main living space in heavy silence. The house was cold, minimalist, and breathtakingly expensive. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of the storm raging outside, while inside shadows clung to the sleek, modern furniture. Maya dropped her weapons onto a massive obsidian coffee table. She felt a sudden crushing weight bear down on her shoulders. She was utterly alone. The life she had built over the last decade was gone in the span of a single night. She walked over to the sprawling glass window, staring out at the grey, churning water. She crossed her arms, shivering slightly in her damp tactical gear. She didn't hear him move, but suddenly Christian was behind her. He didn't touch her, but the heat radiating from his massive frame enveloped her an anchor in the sudden freefall of her reality. "Are you regretting it?" His voice was a low velvet rumble dangerously close to her ear. "Choosing me over them." Maya turned around. They were inches apart. The height difference forced her to tilt her head up to meet his gaze. His eyes were entirely focused on her, stripping away the hardened operative and seeing the woman beneath. "They would have killed me anyway," Christian Maya said honestly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Avery doesn't leave loose ends. If Victor took over, I would have been framed for your murder. It was a suicide mission from the moment I put on that green dress." Christian's hand came up his large, calloused fingers, gently brushing a wet strand of dark hair away from her face. His touch was shockingly tender for a man who had just gunned down 6 men without blinking. "You're not a loose end, Maya." He murmured, his gaze dropping to her lips. "You're the deadliest thing I've ever seen. And you're mine now." The possessiveness in his words didn't frighten her. It ignited a fire in her blood. All the tension, the fear, the adrenaline of the last 12 hours snapped. Maya closed the distance, her hands grabbing the lapels of his ruined tactical shirt, pulling him down to her. He didn't hesitate. Christian's arms wrapped around her waist, lifting her off the ground as his mouth crashed down on hers. It wasn't the desperate, adrenaline-fueled kiss from the loft. This was consuming, punishing, and deeply intentional. He carried her backward, pinning her against the cool glass of the window, his lips trailing down her jaw, kissing the pulse point on her dark, flawless neck. Maya let out a ragged breath, her hands sliding up into his thick, dark hair. In a world where she had nothing left, the raw, undeniable reality of his body against hers was the only thing that made sense. Hours later, the storm had broken, leaving behind a heavy, quiet dusk. A fire roared in the massive stone hearth. Maya sat cross-legged on the plush rug, wearing one of Christian's oversized cashmere sweaters that slipped off one of her shoulders. She had a sleek, heavy-duty military laptop, one Christian kept stored in a Faraday cage in the basement, balanced on her knees. Christian sat on the leather sofa behind her, nursing a glass of bourbon, watching the firelight play across her skin. "You said you needed the ledger to stop Victor's coup," Maya said, typing furiously, bypassing the initial firewalls of the titanium thumb drive Christian had handed her. "But Avery and Black Cube don't care about syndicate money. They have unlimited black budgets. They want something else." Victor mentioned leverage. Christian noted, his voice dark. "My father kept records of every politician, judge, and federal agent the syndicate ever bought. But I had those destroyed when I took over. I run a clean ship. Port authorities and unions only. Nothing is ever truly destroyed in the digital age," Maya muttered. A line of green code reflected in her eyes. "I'm past the first partition, unlocking the hidden directory now." A flurry of documents cascaded across the screen. Maya's eyes widened as she rapidly scrolled through the files, clicking on high-resolution scans of offshore bank transfers, wiretaps, and photographs. Christian Maya breathed the color draining from her face. He leaned forward, setting his bourbon down. "What is it?" "It's not just a ledger," she said, turning the laptop so he could see. "These are Palantir tracking logs. Someone in your syndicate has been using your shipping containers to move something else. Something massive. And it's not drugs or weapons." Christian's eyes scanned the documents, his expression turning to stone. The shell companies listed were tied to the highest echelons of the US government and directly to Avery's division at Black Cube. "They're moving people," Christian said, his voice a lethal whisper. "Human trafficking, using my ports, under my name." Maya looked at him, the horrifying reality settling over them both. "Victor didn't betray you just for the throne. He betrayed you to cover up a global trafficking ring run by the intelligence community. And if this drive gets out, it brings down half of Washington." Christian stood up, the firelight casting demonic shadows across his face. The Mafia boss was gone. What remained was an apex predator ready for war. "Pack your gear," Maya, Christian commanded, racking the slide of his 1911. "We're not hiding anymore. We're going hunting." The port of Newark was a sprawling, rusted labyrinth of steel and salt water. Thousands of shipping containers were stacked like grim, multicolored building blocks under the sickly orange glow of the sodium vapor harbor lights. The air smelled of diesel dead fish and the incoming Atlantic storm. Maya lay prone on the damp roof of a towering gantry crane, peering through the thermal scope of a suppressed SR-25 sniper rifle. Her dark skin was camouflaged by the night, her tactical gear blending perfectly with the shadows. Below her, the terminal was buzzing with unnatural activity for a Tuesday at 3 a.m. "I have eyes on the target area," Maya whispered into her comms. "Terminal 4. They've locked down the perimeter. I'm counting 20 heavily armed PMC contractors, academy gear. And Victor is there. He's standing by a convoy of unmarked transport trucks. Do you see Avery?" Christian's voice crackled in her ear, steady and low. "Negative, but the operation has Black Cube written all over it. They're moving fast. They know we have the drive, and they're trying to scrub the evidence before we can dump the files to the press." Maya shifted her crosshairs, zooming in on the massive red shipping container Victor was aggressively gesturing toward. "Christian, the thermal imaging. There are heat signatures inside the container, dozens of them." A heavy, static-filled silence hung on the line. "I'm moving in," Christian finally replied. The deadly calm in his voice was far more terrifying than any scream of rage. "Give me Overwatch. The moment Victor opens that container, we rain hell on them." Christian wasn't alone. While Maya had been decrypting the drive at the safe house, Christian had made a single analog phone call to a man named Lorenzo Costa, the head of the Genovese family, who controlled the Union side of the Newark ports. Lorenzo despised Victor's erratic business methods and deeply respected Christian's old-school honor. More importantly, the Italian mob had a strict code against human trafficking. When Christian revealed what Victor was moving through Lorenzo's docks, the Don had happily supplied Christian with 20 of his most ruthless enforcers. Through the scope, Maya watched as shadows began to detach themselves from the alleyways between the shipping containers. Christian's makeshift army was moving into position completely undetected by Victor's highly paid but arrogant private military contractors. At the center of the terminal, Victor Park looked like a man unraveling. He was pacing frantically, screaming at a dock worker to hurry up and cut the heavy steel padlock on the red container. "Where is the extraction team?" Victor yelled, his voice echoing over the rhythmic sloshing of the dark harbor water. "Avery promised a Black Hawk for the high-value assets 20 minutes ago." "Mr. Park, we need to clear the docks." The lead academy contractor warned, keeping his rifle raised. "If your brother survived Teterboro, he's coming for you." "My brother is a dead man." Victor spat, wiping rain and sweat from his forehead. He grabbed a pair of bolt cutters from the terrified dock worker and snapped the lock himself. He threw the heavy metal doors open. Through the scope, Maya's breath hitched. Huddled inside the cavernous metal box were roughly 30 women and children, terrified, freezing, and bound. The sheer grotesque reality of the intelligence community's black market funding was staring her right in the face. "Maya." Christian's voice was a dark, hollow echo. "Light them up." Maya exhaled slowly, her heart rate dropping as her JSOC sniper training took absolute control. She centered her crosshairs on the lead contractor standing closest to the open container doors. Thwip. The suppressed high-caliber round took the contractor's head off before the sound of the gunshot even registered over the harbor waves. He dropped instantly. Before the PMCs could scream, Christian's men unleashed absolute devastation. The docks erupted in a deafening crescendo of automatic gunfire. The Italian enforcers fired from the high ground of the stacked containers, catching Victor's men in a brutal crossfire. Maya operated with terrifying precision, her sniper rifle cycling methodically, thwip, 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 dropping any contractor who attempted to flank Christian's position. Christian himself stepped out from the shadows of an adjacent warehouse flanked by Lorenzo's 2 top capos. He wasn't wearing a tuxedo or tactical gear anymore. He wore a sharp midnight black overcoat wielding dual H and KMK 23 handguns. He moved through the chaotic crossfire like the Grim Reaper, executing his brother's treacherous guards with cold mathematical precision. "Cover the container!" Christian roared over the gunfire. "Protect the cargo!" Victor shrieked as his men were slaughtered around him. He scrambled backward, diving behind the thick tires of a transport truck as Christian advanced on him, ignoring the bullets sparking against the pavement at his feet. Suddenly, the deep, rhythmic thumping of helicopter rotors broke through the storm clouds. A sleek, matte black MH-6 Little Bird helicopter descended rapidly from the sky, its side doors open, revealing a heavy machine gunner. "Maya Gunbird inbound," Christian yelled. "I see it." Maya swung her heavy rifle upward. She didn't aim for the gunner, she aimed for the machine itself. She took a deep breath, calculated the wind shear coming off the Atlantic, and pulled the trigger. The heavy armor-piercing round smashed perfectly through the helicopter's tail rotor. Sparks showered into the night sky as the pilot violently lost control. The chopper spun out the machine gunner, firing wildly into the ocean as the aircraft crashed into the dark waters of the harbour, sinking instantly. With their aerial support gone, the remaining Black Cube contractors broke. They threw down their weapons, raising their hands in surrender to the Italian enforcers who swarmed the terminal. The gunfire ceased, leaving only the sound of the rain and the terrified sobs coming from the red shipping container. Christian walked slowly toward the transport truck. Victor was cowering underneath the chassis, his tailored suit ruined by the grease and salt water of the docks. "Come out, Victor." Christian commanded, his voice cold enough to freeze the harbour. Victor slowly crawled out his hands, trembling violently. He looked up at his older brother, the man he had tried to assassinate twice in 24 hours. "Christian, please." It was Avery. Black Cube forced my hand. They threatened to expose the entire syndicate if I didn't let them use the ports. Christian stood over him, his face an unreadable mask. He raised his handgun, pointing it directly between his brother's eyes. "You broke the rules, Victor," Christian said softly. "You betrayed the blood, and you dealt in flesh. There is no coming back from that." Before Christian could pull the trigger, the sharp sound of a slide racking echoed from the shadows behind him. "Drop the weapon, Park, or I put a bullet in your spine." Christian froze. Maya peered through her scope. Stepping out from the darkness of the warehouse, holding a custom Sig Sauer aimed at Christian's back, was Avery, her former handler. He had been waiting out the bloodbath, ready to clean up whoever survived. Maya didn't hesitate. She abandoned her sniper rifle, clipped her harness to the zipline rigged to the crane, and threw herself off the 100-foot platform. Maya plummeted toward the docks, the wind roaring in her ears. She hit the ground rolling, unholstering her Glock 19 in one fluid, desperate motion. She came up directly behind Avery, pressing the hot muzzle of her gun against the base of his neck. "Tell me, Avery," Maya whispered, her voice laced with venom. "Did you really think I wouldn't cover his blind spot?" Avery stiffened. He slowly lowered his weapon, though a smug, arrogant smile remained on his face. "Maya, I see you fully embraced your new role as a Mafia wife. But you're playing a game you can't win. Black Cube is untouchable. We are the ghost in the machine. You kill me and 100 more take my place." "Maybe," Maya said, her dark eyes flashing with a dangerous, triumphant fire. "But you won't be around to see it." She reached into her tactical vest with her free hand, pulling out her encrypted phone. She hit a single button. "What did you do?" Avery demanded, his smile faltering. "While Christian was rallying the Italians, I was busy," Maya replied coldly. "I didn't just decrypt the ledger, Avery. I wrote a script. I just dumped the entire contents of Victor's drive, the Palantir logs, The black market offshore accounts, the human trafficking ledgers to the New York Times, the Washington Post and Interpol. It's on the dark web. It's on Reddit. It's everywhere. Black Cube is burned. Avery's face went pale. The untouchable ghost had just been dragged into the blinding light of the public square. "You just signed your own death warrant," Avery hissed. "No!" Christian interrupted, turning around to face the man who had ordered his execution. His dark eyes were bottomless pits of absolute authority. "She just bought the throne." Christian didn't look at Avery. He looked down at Victor, who was still kneeling in the mud, weeping. "Look at me, brother," Christian commanded. Victor looked up. Bang! Christian fired a single shot. Victor slumped to the wet pavement, dead before he realized what had happened. Avery flinched, attempting to raise his gun again, but Maya was faster. She fired 2 rounds into the back of Avery's knees, bringing the handler crashing to the ground in agonizing pain. "Lorenzo's men will take out the trash," Christian said, looking at Avery writhing on the ground. He turned to Maya, the cold, sociopathic mask dropping instantly, replaced by a look of profound, consuming reverence. He walked up to her, his large hands reaching out to cup her face. His thumbs gently stroked her high cheekbones, wiping away the rain and the soot. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. "I'm fine," Maya breathed, leaning into his touch, the adrenaline finally washing away, to leave only the intoxicating heat of his proximity. "The drive is public. Victor is dead. The elders will have no choice but to recognize your absolute authority now. You protected the port. You protected the families." "I don't care about the elders," Christian murmured, wrapping his arms around her waist and pulling her flush against his chest. The chaos of the docks, the flashing sirens in the distance, the moans of the defeated contractors, all of it faded into white noise. He looked deeply into her eyes, seeing the brilliant, lethal woman who had saved his life, dismantled an intelligence agency, and stood by his side through hellfire. "I told you," Christian said, his voice a low, vibrating promise against her lips. "If we survived this, we were going to have a conversation about your future." Maya smiled, a genuinely breathtaking sight that made the dark Mafia boss's heart skip a beat. She slid her arms around his neck, her dark skin glowing in the rain. "I'm currently unemployed, Christian. I suppose I'm open to negotiations." "There are no negotiations," Christian said, leaning down. "You are my equal, my partner, my queen. The underworld belongs to us now." He kissed her, then a deep, bruising, triumphant kiss that sealed their bloody pact. They had started the night as enemies forced into a deadly dance under the threat of a sniper's laser. Now they stood amidst the wreckage of their betrayers, the undisputed rulers of a new empire. Together, the ghost and the king walked away from the docks, leaving the burning remnants of the past behind them, ready to conquer the future. The line between justice and vengeance was obliterated the moment Maya stepped into Christian's arms. In a world ruled by deception, they found the ultimate truth in each other, forging an unstoppable empire from the ashes of betrayal. She thought she was dancing with a dead man. Instead, she awakened a king and crowned herself his queen. If this pulse-pounding Mafia romance kept you on the edge of your seat, smash that like button, share this incredible story with your friends who can't resist a lethal power couple, and subscribe to the channel for more dark twisting and thrilling sagas. Don't forget to ring the notification bell so you never miss a chapter. Drop a comment below. What was your favorite moment between Maya and Christian? See you in the next one.